appreciate the COPS office allowing us to present this series of webinars through a grant, and we very much appreciate their continued support. And as Cindy kept talking about, and I've talked about a little bit, is we're 100% dependent upon technology to bring you to session, and we always know what that means. So as Cindy said, we're recording it and we'll send it to your email, and we'd also like for you to be able to pass that along to others who you think might benefit from listening to what I've got to say today. The webinar platform does take a little bit of bandwidth, and depending on where you're at in your internet connection, you could get disconnected, as Cindy said. If that happens, just go ahead and get back on, give it another shot, and then you can try to get the audio through your phone instead of your computer. Now, if I get disconnected, and we don't even want to think about that, but if it happens, we will still end up with a recorded version that you'll have access to. Cindy mentioned the chat bar, and we'll use that chat bar to take questions if you'd like. And if you have a comment as I'm talking, and those of you that have been on our webinars before, I know that I certainly don't know everything. With 30 years of work experience, I have learned a thing or two, but there's a lot of things I don't know. So if you have something you think would benefit the group, feel free to chime in on the chat bar and offer a comment or suggestions or questions. And although while I'm doing this, it is a bit of a challenge to feel like I'm in an airplane or something. I'm pushing buttons and changing slides and doing things here, so it can get a little overwhelming sometimes. So I might miss what you're saying on the chat bar, but Cindy will monitor it and she'll let me know if there's something that we need to address. I asked this as you guys were coming on, and I gave you an opportunity. So in the chat bar, if you would like, does kind of give me an idea of where you guys are at. Do we have groups in your communities, and we call them partnerships, groups, the multidisciplinary teams, the child protective teams, those kinds of groups? And if you do, what makes them successful? How do we see that the effort they're putting forth is making a difference in our communities? And I say the reason they failed. Failure is typically just when they can discontinue meetings and it sort of just falls apart, falls by the wayside. And if there are no such groups, are there reasons in your community that that's so? So if you have a chance and you want to comment in the chat bar, that would be appreciated. Every time that we have a webinar, every time I have an occasion to speak, either personally or through technology to folks out in Indian country, I'd like to offer you my thanks. As a child, we lived on a number of different reservations, and I'll mention that here in a second. But my mom was in social services, and at one point my dad was a tribal chief of police. So I saw, even as a child, I saw the things that they faced and the things that would sometimes leave my mother in tears as she and my father talked about issues of the community. So I know what you face. I know that you are, as I've said in this slide, that the eyes that see, the hearts that care, the ears that patiently listen, and oftentimes it's the tears that you shed in the dead of night. I offer my thank you to you for that dedication and effort that you engage as you in working in our communities. It means so very much to us all. And as I've said, and I'll say over and over, there are no easy solutions to the issues that we face. There's no quick fix to address our community issues. It's hard work, communication, and partnership that are key ingredients to making these positive changes. And communication, over the 30 years of experience that I have, and I was at the Oklahoma City bombing, I was at the standoff in Waco, Texas, I was at the Rodney King riots, worked on the Green River murder case. I've worked on a lot of things in my career, and I learned early on the importance of communication, how it brings us together, how it puts us together, and how it moves us ahead in a positive fashion. As Cindy was saying, I grew up on reservations throughout Indian country, Blackfeet, Wind River, Jicarilla, Southern Pueblos, and Oklahoma Indian country. Nearly 18 years of my career have been dedicated to Indian country law enforcement, security, and emergency preparedness. My immediate family and relatives live and work in Indian country. Trust me, I didn't just read about the issues of Indian country. I didn't just study the issues of Indian country and think that I'm some kind of an expert. I've lived them. And as a person who has lived these issues in the communities, I'm asked a lot of times. I'm asked by people in Washington, D.C. I'm asked by communities that I've been out and talked to. I've been asked by a lot of people. I say, what can we do? What can we do? How can we make a difference? What would you do to address the issues that we face? What do you think are effective ways to deal with these problems of our community? And you can trust me on this. There have been many a night that I've been kept awake wondering about those very things, because the things that are faced out in our tribal communities are the very things that my immediate family has dealt with. And we've dealt with the prescription drug issue. We've dealt with alcoholism. We've dealt with youth suicide. I mean, those are issues that have been at my front door. So I worry about those things, and like I said, I've been kept awake at night wondering, how do we make a difference? How do we make the change that we all so desperately want? And each time I've thought about it, each time I come to the very same conclusion. It's communication and partnership. It's the only way that we can have an impact. And as I said early on, there's no secret sauce that I have, or that we have, or that anybody has. But I will tell you that the only way we can make a difference, the only way we can make the change that we need, is communication and partnership. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We can struggle every day in our cubicle or our office working against this tidal wave of alcohol, drugs, violent crime. We can work alone to address those issues, the community disorder that affects some of our tribal communities, or we can join hearts, minds, and resources together to make a positive change. And I don't want that to sound Pollyannish, that we're going to all grab hands and sing Kumbaya and everything is going to be okay. That's not what I mean or where I'm going, but we do have to join hearts, minds, and resources, and we will make a difference. So before I get carried away, and I can do that very easily, trust me, always in our communities, we look to start off in a good way. So I ask you, in your own way, offer thoughts, words, positive energy as we look to those that have gone before us, those that offered prayers for our well-being. So our thoughts go out to them, asking for the strength, guidance, and direction to make our communities healthy and safe. So let's just take a moment and focus that positive energy. I mentioned this in in the last webinar, and I want to mention it again. This is a photograph of my Aunt Doris. She passed away in August of this past year. She was the last fluent speaker of the Wichita language. She and my father, my dad died in 1989. She and my father were the youngest of the Wichita tribe that were fluent speakers. When I listened to recordings of her speaking in the Wichita language, I mean, as you can only imagine, it's just with such very mixed emotions. I love hearing the language, but I know that it's a stark reminder that everyday bits and pieces of our culture, our identity disappear. And a key to community is identity. Therefore, we must strive to preserve our identity. And you know, and I know, it's harder and harder to maintain language and tradition in this day and age. So it's up to us to carry on identity as best we can, to make sure the children of our communities are educated in the ways of our people, they know their ancestors, that they hear stories and see pictures. And in my mind, truly, this is where partnership begins. Now, again, I'll mention that this is the second in a series of webinars, and 5 in all, counting this one. Next one's scheduled in March, and is titled Improving Your Collaborative Partnerships. April will be putting community policing to work, and also in April, the last in this series, engaging youth in community policing. Keep an eye out for those invitations with dates and times. The last webinar was an introduction meant to promote thoughtful examination of your community issues, to set the stage for you to visualize your community's crime problem and the impact that it has on the community. Visualize community policing, what it should look like in your community. I mentioned this last time. I mean, so often that sometimes the folks in DC, they look at Indian country as one size fits all, that if there are initiatives, they tailor initiatives for Indian country, not recognizing that we are also individual and have individual issues that we deal with in our communities. At the end of this particular webinar, Cindy will send you, as you get the evaluation, you'll see where you can go to view the first webinar, the recorded version if you'd like, and it'll also tell you where to go to see the recording of this webinar. Now, I mentioned the last time too that we're developing an online course in conjunction with the COPS office. We're really excited about that, and that's going to allow you to explore these and related issues in the convenience of your office or at home, and to be able to pass on to others in your office or that you work with. Best of all, you'll be able to spend all the time that you need in this online version of the issues that we're talking about in these webinars. So you can explore, dig deeper, find links that will take you to places on the internet where you can study and research the things that we're talking about. So that first webinar, what I wanted to leave you with was a better understanding of community policing and what those elements are, a working knowledge of SARA, which is a scanning, analysis, response, assessment, problem-solving model. And although it's not the only problem-solving model out there, I'm a believer in it, and I think that it's an important way that can help us as we establish these collaborative community partnerships. And then we try to leave you with an understanding how the root causes of crime can be positively impacted by community partnerships. That was webinar 1. So as we go into this webinar, building a collaborative partnership. So it requires us to understand the importance of bringing together key community members to address issues of concern. And we're going to talk about kind of what that means, what that looks like. Again, I say that we use these verbiage, these words, collaborative community partnerships, collaboration partnerships. In reality, what we're talking about is folks coming together to to talk about and visit about and understand what's going on in the community. So we all understand the inner workings of group dynamics. Today we want you to just think about those dynamics as being a natural result of two or more people working together, and it's not an insurmountable obstacle. I mean, we run across some of these issues and we address them like it's like, oh my God, we can't get past this. We can always get past it. We can always work past obstacles. We've done that for generations. And it's always interesting because the first meetings are many times this feel-good gathering. It's like, oh boy, this is great. We got everybody together. Let's get it done. Let's work together. I'm all in. And it's that kind of meeting where we feel that kind of excitement. But then a variety of obstacles can slow, stymie, even the most energetic of folks. So let's say we've gathered the right group, we targeted a problem, established goals, set the work. We have to constantly assess the outcomes to know how we make adjustments and know if we're having the desired impact. Are we doing what we want to do and what we think we need to do? So if you guys don't mind, Brett, I'd like to go back over the Sarah model that we talked about in the last webinar, just to kind of, again, sort of frame out this problem-solving tool. Scanning, and that's always the first step, and that's, I think we're going to be talking, we will be talking about that as we talk about what these community partnerships mean. The first step requires the community this group of folks that have come together to recognize recurring issues and their outcomes within the community, within your community. Then once we recognize what those issues are, whether it be graffiti, whether it be homeless gathering up in houses and burning candles and drinking in abandoned homes, whatever that issue is in the community, we look at it, we understand it through the scanning process, then we develop and prioritize our goals to resolve the issue. So this model was developed for law enforcement, the SARA model. It has to do with the community-oriented policing, but I believe it has tremendous value in our collaborative community partnerships, and we can use it in all of the venues that we come together to discuss these community-related issues. So as I mentioned, graffiti is an example. When it goes unabated, unaddressed, you know what, an entire housing area can be defaced. And those folks that want to live in a neighborhood that's not riddled with all kinds of graffiti all over, broken windows, they don't want to live in that kind of community. And I've driven through those communities and so many of our reservations where you drive through and it's just this graffiti everywhere. That's a problem. But it's not a problem that we can't address because we can't. We just have to be able to create an analysis. We got to know about what that problem is. Where does it happen? Who's doing it? What's the impact? How often is it occurring? Okay, that's the analysis part of the SARA model. The response. This step can enable us to use research from the analysis to brainstorm ideas for intervention, select intervention options, outline plans, objectives, and implement proposed plans. I mean, we can take folks that are sentenced in our tribal courts to community service and give them the tools. You can go out and clean up the graffiti. I mean, there's ways to respond. Then the assessment of it within the SARA model is after we've tried to solve a problem, this assessment can then, it requires us to evaluate. What do we do with this implemented plan that we put in place? Sometimes it takes data collection. We're going to talk about that towards the end of the webinar today. But during this step, we determine whether our initial goals were met, and also, as we're conducting ongoing assessment, whether or not we make adjustments to our initiatives so that we can better affect the outcome. So it's scanning, analysis, response, and assessment, a very simple tool. There's a lot of research online. You can simply go to the Department of Justice COPS office website, and you can find articles, you can find all kinds of discussion about implementing the SARA process. So when we talk about this, this issue of collaboration and partnerships, collaborate is just simply it's working together with others in a joint endeavor. Could be to cooperate with an agency that you're not immediately connected to. So in other words, outside your silo. To work jointly with others, well, that's pretty basic, pretty simple. Working together to accomplish agreed upon goals. Cooperating with other agencies or entities simply means working in partnerships outside of our silo. And when I talk about silos, I mean, I think we all have an idea in our minds what that looks like, what it means. We see the workplace silo. So we're in social services and we're in this workplace silo that in the desk over is another person working in social services. The desk over is another person working social services. And in the office is the director who's managing us. Oftentimes what happens is we end up just talking to each other. We're comfortable in that venue because we understand everything there is to know about social services. The person that's sitting in the desk next to me is working social services and they understand what it is. We have that similar mindset, that similar mission. So it's so easy for us just to talk to each other. And that happens so very often, is that we end up just talking to each other. Partnership is where we end up with this arrangement where parties have come together to cooperate and advance their mutual interests. And in this partnership, I mentioned the photograph in the partnership. As my grandbaby, and I said this in the last webinar, that my little granddaughter is wearing a buckskin jacket that was mine, and she's laying on a 150-year-old buffalo robe of my great grandmother. So to me, it's the partnership is representative of the contemporary, where we are today, and it's based on where we were then and what we're able to take from our history and our traditions. Cindy Nicole, as she commented here that there's no closed captioning, can you email her the document that I sent you earlier?
Yes, I will. And once this webinar is over, we add the text to the document, and then it will be uploaded to our technical assistant site.
Okay. You might send a text to Nicole and let her know that. All right. Let's see now. Let me get back to so we're talking about building a collaborative partnership, community partners coming together to jointly advance mutual interests. And you know what, I'd like to use that as our working definition of what we're talking about today. Community partners coming together to jointly advance mutual interests. And then that collaboration occurs when everybody that's involved, they share the responsibility, ideas, and resources to resolve community problems. So often we talk about this resource issue that we're resource poor, we're limited, we don't have resources. You know, I got to tell you that over and over when I go to our communities, we're resource rich. And we're resource rich in the fact that we have our elders, we have the traditions, we have our culture. Those are all resources that oftentimes that we forget to call on and forget to bring into our working relationships and our partnerships are those particular resources. And we have to call on that because that goes back to our identity. Those resources are who we are and what we can do and how we affect the change that we want. Collaboration accomplishes what individuals alone cannot. And every time I say the same thing is over and over, that there's not a general in the world that's going to send a one-man army in on anything. If you have a battalion, you're going to send a battalion because strength is in numbers. And strength is in numbers in our communities, where we talk about this community collaborative partnership, coming together, working together. Chief Robert Bryant from Penobscot, his statement is right on. It's absolutely right on. In a traditional law enforcement context, it's all about enforcing the law to ensure community order. And trust me, as a career law enforcement guy, that was key in my mind, is developing and coming up with the evidence to support the violation of elements of a crime and get somebody arrested. But now most of us, we realize that it's only through working together that we can positively affect the change. The Penobscot Police Department Public Safety's mission statement says, okay, this is their mission statement. It says, the department seeks to enhance the quality of life within the nation's territories by building partnerships and coalitions with tribal citizens, agencies, and elected leadership, so that together we may identify and find solutions to common problems, utilizing Penobscot cultural values, laws to preserve community peace, reduce fear, and provide a safe environment for all. Man, I'm telling you, their mission statement is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, and it is, I got to tell you, it's perfect for our discussion today. Okay, so what does a partnership look like? And I'm seeing in the text bar, you guys are probably seeing the same thing, that and these are the issues that we deal with on some of these technical issues. So we will, trust me, we'll take care of the closed captioning for Nicklin Plummer, so that she gets the text to this as she looks at the recorded version. And that's so important that we try very hard to be inclusive on all of this technology, so that we're able to provide it in 508 compliance, and that means the captionings and everything that we have to do to be able to ensure that we can be inclusive for everybody. So what does this partnership look like? What does a partnership look like? Who's included? And as we talk today, the inference is that a collaborative community partnership is made up of a group of people representing a cross-section of the community. But I got to tell you that a collaborative community partnership could be as simple as a chief of police meeting with the director of social services for coffee every Thursday morning to talk about issues of mutual concern. Okay? So that could be just two people meeting for coffee to be a collaborative community partnership. And that as we talk about creating these partnerships, that could even be a good start to a larger group, as you have as the chief of police and social services meeting, and they realize that there's important issues that are being discussed, but they realize that they're missing the input from housing, because the issues they're talking about involve housing, involve issues in housing. So let's call up the director of housing and let's invite him to come meet with us next Thursday as we have coffee and these issues are talked about. Well, now then, you see what I'm talking about. We can start gradually building out and adding people to, and it's an easy way to create the habit and to create the atmosphere that promotes these collaborative community partnerships. So where do we meet? Could be at the coffee shop, could be at the conference room at the tribal office. All that's needed is just the right amount of space to ensure seating for everybody. What will be our focus? Well, this is where the SARA model can add process to what our focus is. I think as I asked you in the last webinar, and I mentioned this morning, is being able to visualize what are the issues in our communities? What are the things that we want to address? What are the things that are sticking out like a sore thumb that call for attention? Okay, we can take that Sarah model, then we can add process to creating and developing and understanding what our focus. How often do we meet? You know what? I simply say that the schedule, whatever that schedule is, has to be realistic. You know, on the front end, when I was mentioning earlier about everybody being energized and excited about getting together, energized by the group dynamic and feeling that group energy, it's always, well, you know what? More meetings are going to be better. And it's kind of like the kid with cologne. Well, if a little bit smells good, then a lot will smell great. Well, sometimes more is not, and we have to recognize and be realistic about creating the right kind of schedule so that we don't stunt sustainability. We want to ensure sustainability. And thinking about sustainability, you know what? When you miss one meeting, then it's easier to miss the second, and then it's easy just to not go back. I mean, you think I'm right on that? You miss one meeting, then it's like, there's no consequence to it, and the next one rolls around, you feel like you're kind of busy, so boom, you don't go back. You know, I was at in a tribal community, and I won't mention which tribal community specifically, but I was in attendance at one of their very first meetings of a partnership, of a collaborative community partnership. Man, I'm telling you, everybody was on the same sheet of music. They were feeling excited and energized, and we were talking about, we are the ones we've been waiting for, and it's like you could just feel the energy in there. And then the details as we started working out, and me, I was only there as a facilitator, so I was just helping the group kind of pull together. Well, as the details started to be worked out, the group decided, and rightly so, that there had to be a leader. So they named a leader. And I'm telling you that group leadership, how important that is. I think it's absolutely critical. We've all been in meetings where there's either weak, vacant, or no leadership, and things just kind of wander and stumble around. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But as a leader was named at this particular community, one lady, I mean, she jumped up, and it's almost like she came off the ground, and she forcefully stated, I'm not going to be a part of a group that's led by a woman whose daughter is a heroin dealer. Trust me, the excitement and energy in that room was completely sucked out of the room. And you can imagine that it's and you guys have been there. I mean, you've been in meetings, you've been in situations where those kinds of things happen. And in that instance, when the energy was sucked out of the room and everybody was in stunned silence, moving ahead almost became a moot issue. It's like everybody was ready to jump up and just, let's get the heck out of here before the battle starts. So I know you've heard some of these same kinds of issues as you've worked in partnerships, if you've worked in developing partnerships. How would you deal with that situation? How would you, if you were in that situation and you or me facilitating it, how would you deal with that kind of situation to diffuse it and try to restore the energy back to the room so that you can move on? These are exactly the kinds of issues that you can plan to face as we come up with building collaborative community partnerships. You know, and I kind of mentioned this. It's so easy to come up with all kinds of reasons not to participate. And this is absolutely the first dynamic that we have to overcome. We've got to get past local interpersonal history. What does that mean? My dad was a tribal chairman for a lot of years, and you guys understand in Indian country, you've got tribal politics, and at one point or another, they were trying to recall him, and then there was this infighting, and then we go to powwows and they'd say, oh, you can't talk to that person, you can't talk to that person. You know, they're voting against your dad, they come out against your dad. That's all local interpersonal history. So you can only imagine if you are putting together this collaborative community partnership and you have the daughter of a person who ran for tribal chair and the son of another person who got elected to tribal chair. There's that local interpersonal history, and we have got to get past that. We have to get past those kinds of issues that drag us down, that hold us back. We've got to get past the excuses, those excuses where, oh, I got too many meetings, there's too much work to do, I don't have time for more meetings. Nobody else has to work as hard as I do. Why should I waste my time with the slackers? I've tried working in groups, and then they just fade away. Nothing ever gets done. We got to get past the naysayers. We got to get past the rumor mill. We got to get past our individual issues, because yes, we each have our own individual issues that we have to deal with. Why? Why do we need to do that? Well, I got to tell you why. Because the stakes are way too high not to. The stakes are way too high not to. And when I mentioned earlier that we are the ones, and it's always us saying, you know, when is somebody going to do something about this? When is somebody going to take the reins? When is somebody going to make the change? When are we going to recognize that change? Who's going to do it? Well, you know what? We are the ones. And it's up to us to do exactly what we're talking about today. It's each of us has to take a leadership role to make a collaborative community partnership a reality. But what is a leadership role? Leadership can be as simple as just attending every meeting. Your example sets a tone, and setting a tone is leadership. Leading by example is leadership. And it's us that we've been waiting for. So when I mentioned earlier about the online courses that we're developing and the online platform that we're developing, this is going to be what they look like. They're scenario based, they're story based, they're caricatures that we work and we found that it's an excellent way to communicate in Indian country. Indian country, I believe that we gravitate to scenario-based, to story-based, so that we can visualize and we can work our way through that kind of training. And I just, it's been effective, and I like it personally, and people that we've talked to seem to enjoy some of the online courses that we put together. Key and on this particular slide, key is always to take into consideration the perspective of all. The first step in team building is to introduce an understanding of each participant's role in a community. And we're going to talk about that. What does your job or position require? We sometimes take for granted that others understand what we do and how we do it. I got to tell you, there's so many times that there is no such understanding beyond simple definitions. Policing, aside from all the jokes that folks have and like to tell, you know, donuts and blah, 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 this and that. They have a basic understanding of what policing is. They see a guy or a woman in uniform, they're in a patrol car, they go driving by, they may arrest a relative, a friend. So we see what they're doing. But you know what? Most times we have no idea how complex the jurisdictional issues they're facing might be. We have no idea of what kinds of legal constraints they're dealing with, what kinds of issues they're dealing with in terms of shortages of manpower and so on. We have an idea what they do, but we don't know a lot of the intricate details of that particular position. Coming together from a cross-section of our community requires us to better understand each other's roles and areas of responsibility, coming together so that we can understand those roles and responsibilities. You know, when we say, what does she know? Okay, what does she know? A business person. What might she know that the rest of the group doesn't know? Well, Could be she's managing a tribal convenience store and has taken note of an uptick in the theft of baby formula. She's a business person, she's running the tribal convenience store, and she's noticed that there's an uptick in the theft of baby formula. Well, what does that mean? Well, she and maybe others might think it has to do with mothers or caregivers simply needing to feed babies. It's maybe just a need to feed babies and they don't have the resources, the income to be able to purchase baby formula. But sitting around the table, law enforcement could add an explanation that the theft of baby formula is a growing national problem. Powdered baby formula can be used to cut heroin or cocaine. And we know that cut, meaning to add the powdered baby formula to heroin or cocaine to increase the amount. So if you increase the amount, then you can sell it for more. So they cut heroin and cocaine with baby formula. Well, that may not be an issue that we bring to the surface if we don't understand that it's even happening. We don't know that it's happening in our community, that baby formula is being stolen. There's an uptick, and we don't understand why people are doing it. If we're sitting around the table talking to each other, there's a much better chance and much better opportunity we're going to be able to understand what that means. What things might come to his attention, a healthcare worker. He may know that heroin overdoses are on the rise. And that's it. I think it's interesting anyway. I don't know. I think it was like 7 years ago, maybe, I wrote an article for Indian Country Today that said our next major battle, heroin. And then sadly, I wrote an article about a year later and says what I said in that first article has come to fruition, that we started losing lives in Indian Country from heroin. And it was all a simple matter of talking to people that were coming to our training that were informing us about a trend. We saw a trend coming. And those are the things that we have to recognize in our communities. Through bringing people together, we're able to much better understand what kind of trends that we're facing. This person in healthcare that may recognize signs and symptoms of drug use that's affecting kids, even in junior high. The school teacher in the group, okay, because we're talking about a cross-section being in our community collaborative partnerships. The school teacher in this group might learn exactly what those signs and symptoms are, and then he or she might be better able to recognize the issue before an overdose occurs, and can also recognize the trend, because now that teacher is going to be equipped to understand and recognize what that looks like with regard to signs and symptoms. So I mentioned this earlier already, that when we saw what Chief Bryant said, when law enforcement's understaffed and overwhelmed, they become incredibly reactive and revert to simply arresting and ticketing. And we all know, and it's been said over and over, that we will never arrest ourselves out of somebody's community issues. We're not going to be able to just arrest ourselves out of it, nor do we want to do that. Once law enforcement is able to see that there's others willing to assist and add resources to ensure that there is a true community-oriented policing movement in our community, then law enforcement, then it's easier for them to be able to take a more proactive approach, to take that proactive approach that we want them to be able to take, so that we can prevent crime from occurring, that we can take those preventative actions to prevent and mitigate. How important is it to get buy-in from tribal government? Well, I don't know. Do you think it's important? I think it is, and I think it's critical to get buy-in, first of all, from all community service providers. And if we get buy-in, then we're going to get participation. If we get participation, we can create this kind of collaborative community partnership that we need. But it requires buy-in, and you know what? It gets a lot simpler when we have buy-in from tribal leadership. And we know, just like law enforcement gets overwhelmed, we know that our tribal leaders get so overwhelmed with a multitude of issues. It's incredible what they deal with every day. But if we can demonstrate we're on a road to positive change, buy-in can be almost automatic. So, and I mentioned to you, my mom was a social worker, and I'm very proud of what she did throughout her career. And I went to a conference at one point, and a person who got up and eloquently spoke in a speech. And then I got up and I spoke. And after I spoke, this woman came and she asked if I knew, and she mentioned my mother's name. And I said, absolutely, that's my mother. And she said, because of your mother, I am who I am today. She said, because of your mother, she made sure I was in the right foster care, that I was looked after, that the issues that I was facing as a young person, that we were able to get past those things, and I am who I am today. So we can never underestimate the impact that we each one of us can have, and in some small way can make some big thing happen. So part of an excuse can always be, I can't be part of a group talking about issues that are of a confidential nature. Okay, that can be law enforcement. That can be for an excuse a lot of our community service providers can use. Cops can't talk about active investigations. Teachers can't talk about kids. Social service can't talk about specific cases or clients. Behavioral health can't talk about clients. Well, you know what? These issues are real, but it doesn't mean there aren't answers. And those of you that have MDTs and CPTs in your community, you recognize that MOUs, state, tribal, and federal regulations and statutes can permit some level of sharing. Otherwise, these groups that have been funded, that have grants, they'd never be able to exist. But I got to tell you, even beyond MOUs and statute and regulation comes the most important thing of all, and that's trust. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Trust is at the hub. So, I mean, it's a lens that we look through. Our job mission, gender, race, tribal affiliation, education, family, religion, age, they're lenses. And they filter what we see, how we see it, and how we process what we see. But more importantly, each one of us hold a piece of information that is part of a larger picture. And when those pieces come together, they create the complete picture of what our community truly faces. And I got to tell you, we can never effectively employ the SARA model or any other problem-solving model if we work in a vacuum, if we work together, as in that first picture there where the pieces of the puzzle are all laying out there alone and individual. We can never make that change, that progress that we want in our communities. We need the information of others to make that information happen, where we can use information. And just like I talked about in that first slide with the business person recognizing that there was an uptick in the theft of baby formula, to recognize what that truly means. If those people hadn't been brought together so that the puzzle pieces are put together to form a picture, likely that observation would not have ever been known. That trend would have been missed. So what are group dynamics? All right, what are group dynamics? Kurt Lewin, a social psychologist and change management expert, he's credited with coming up with that term or coining that term, group dynamics, and that was in the early 1940s. And he noted that people often take on very distinct roles and behaviors when they work in a group. And I got to tell you, I don't know if you guys watch Survivor on television, but I watch it not because I'm addicted to reality TV by any stretch. Trust me on that. But because it's such an insight into group dynamics and how people's roles develop in those situations. It really is an interesting microcosm to observe. Group dynamics describes the effects of these roles and behaviors on other group members and on the group as a whole. More recent researchers have built on Lewin's ideas and the work has become central to good management process, okay, in the workplace. But also these group dynamics affect what we're talking about today in these collaborative partnerships. So a group with a positive dynamic, man, I got to tell you, that's so easy to spot. Team members trust one another. Team members trust one another. They work towards a collective decision, and they hold one another accountable. Okay? Hold one another accountable. How important is that? It's accountability for making things happen. So often we get folks that just love to talk, and they like to hear each other talk, they like to hear themselves talk, but nobody holds anybody accountable to making that talk come true. So as well, researchers have found that when a team has a positive dynamic, its members are nearly twice as creative as an average group. Amazing, huh? Nearly twice as creative as any average group. In a group with poor group dynamics, and I think we know exactly what those look like, people's behavior disrupt the effort. We've seen it over and over. As a result, the group may simply not be able to make any kind of decisions at all. As you think about these things, what causes these poor group dynamics? Well, weak leadership. Wonder if somebody do me a favor and can you type down in the chat bar just that that you can still hear me? Cindy sent me a text and said that she's offline. Okay. Thanks, Brett and Cindy. I mean, it's like one of those things when I got to tell you, these webinar things are very weird because it's like there's no feedback. So I don't know if you're listening, if you're looking at me, if you are smiling, if you are taking a note. Teresa, thanks. I appreciate that. And I see you're from out of Navajo land. I was a St. Michael's Cardinals and a Winter Rock Scout way back in the day. So I'm glad you guys are still there. We've lost Cindy. What causes the poor group dynamics? Weak leadership. And when a team lacks a strong leader, a more dominant member of the group can often take charge. I mean, we've seen that, right? When there's not a good, strong leader in the group that has very domineering, they take charge, and that can lead to a lack of direction, and it can create infighting or a focus on the wrong priorities. We've all sat in on meetings without strong leadership, and it usually ends up being a wishy-washy nothing. Then there's, and we're talking about poor group dynamics, there's an excessive deference to authority. So people want to be seen to agree with the leader. You guys have seen this ever since we've been back in the school days. We get those people who I see where Teresa responded. She's a Cardinal too. Anyway, so people. I'm sorry, I got distracted here all of a sudden. But I was talking about the poor group dynamics and that we got folks that all the way back into school where you got that. It's me. I know the answer. I know the answer. You get the. And I won't say what we called them back then, but you get those kind of people who there's excessive deference to authority. And then you know what? Therefore, other folks will hold back from expressing their own opinions. And the people who have that deference, they won't express their opinions either because they're so intent on getting the attention of that leader. Blocking, a phrase that they coined that happens when team members behave in a way that disrupts the flow of information in a group. And I mean, if you close your eyes for a second and think of yourselves in meetings and in groups, you know exactly what that means. And blocking roles, there's what we call the aggressor, the person who often disagrees with others, who is inappropriately outspoken. And, I got to tell you, that is and I'm sorry, Cindy's telling me that it's now it's going to be up to me to close the meeting and send you the evaluation. So now the pressure's really on me. She's telling me she got the spinning wheel of death on her computer. So it's actually her computer that sounds like crapped out. So we got the aggressor, and like I said, close your eyes, think about that. You know what that looks like. Then you have the negator, that person who's critical of everybody's ideas or of proposed plans, or, oh no, that's never going to work. We never be able to get that off the ground. Oh, there's a tribal regulation. We can't do that. Then you got the withdrawer, and that person doesn't participate in the discussion. And I said that's going to be the withdrawer, and we've seen them. I think if you close your eyes, like I said, and you visualize these meetings you've been in, there's those people that don't participate, and by not participating, they're sitting there and they're looking down, or they're doing nothing, and that can be a distraction in itself. Then there's a recognition seeker, and that person is kind of boastful or dominates a discussion. I'm not going to mention any kind of tribes that have that trait. Then there's the joker. That's the person that introduces humor at the inappropriate times. Maybe that's what I was doing. So what we end up with is we got to think about groupthink, and that happens when people place a desire for consensus. We got to have a desire for consensus, but we don't want that desire to overreach making right decisions. We don't want to go to that place where it says, okay, everybody agrees on this, let's do it. In the back of your mind saying, oh yeah, well that might not be the right thing. And then it prevents us from exploring alternative solutions. Mm-hmm. And then there's the free riding. The free riders, they're the folks who take the easy way. They leave it to everybody else to actually do the work. And they may work harder getting out of work than their willingness to actually engage and get work done for the group. And sometimes that's termed as social loafing. I think we know social loafers, and we've seen them over and over. Evaluation apprehension. There's folks, they don't want to be judged. They don't want to say things, and they're afraid that if somebody judges them or says something harsh about what they're saying, and so they hold back. They just hold back. They have something to say. They want to say it, but they hold back because they're afraid of that judgment. So we've already gone over by 6 minutes, but we started a little bit late. So because usually at the top of the hour we take it to questions and comments, but I'm going to go ahead and move on here because we did start a little bit late. But the primary tool to upend negative group dynamics, to be able to overcome those negative group dynamics, what did I say earlier? Right here at the hub is trust. And it's such a simple word, trust, but such a tough task. It's so hard to be able to create that, develop it. How do we create trust? How do we create it? How do we maintain trust? Okay, we might be able to create it, but how do we maintain it? And I have to tell you, I think that's where the heavy lift comes in. And the heavy lift comes in because trust in our communities is so very fragile. You might disagree with me on this, but I believe trust in our communities is so very fragile. One false rumor can demolish the trust of an entire group. So we have to be so careful what we say, and we have to be so careful processing what we hear. We hear, and oftentimes we take what we hear, instead of taking it with a grain of salt, we take it and we add importance to it, and it immediately undermines and dissolves our trust. We've got to develop strategies to negate those dysfunctional dynamics. I got to tell you, I think that those dynamics have stymied our community growth, that we have gotten so wrapped up in the rumor mills and that diminished trust that we have sometimes a hard time developing and building out trust. And I got to tell you, all you got, and I think you'll agree with me on this one. All you got to do is go to almost any tribal Facebook page to read the nasty things that we say to each other, right? Sometimes I mean, I've said this before, is that I don't think anybody can be meaner to Indians than Indians. I mean, it is astounding sometimes what you read and what you hear coming from inside of our own communities, and that is so difficult for us as we're working to develop the trust that we have to create a community collaborative partnership. So, one of the things that I think I might have moved on here a little bit too quickly, but one of the things that we've got to think about is understanding and improving these dynamics is knowledge. We've got to know what the knowledge of the team. We have to know each other. You know what? I got to tell you, I sat on one of these community partnership, and there was a person who lost a child in a drunk driving wreck. And I'm telling you, anytime there was discussion about drunk driving, there was discussion about ways to address the issue in the community, that person had such a strong and emotional response that it stymied any real discussion because folks started becoming leery about even talking about it. But that's part of knowledge of the team, knowing who folks are that are on the team and knowing some of their background and some of the things that they've gone through so that we can work through those issues. And a leader must guide this development, guide the group. Every group goes through phases as it develops, just like our interpersonal relationships. They go through phases. And when you understand what these phases are, you can preempt problems that can arise, including issues with these that I've talked about in this poor group dynamics. We can get past those things. But we've got to be able to identify positive, negative group dynamics to build this understanding so we know how it affects the group as a whole. So we got to create strategies to deal with these potential problems. We can't just take that Pollyannish approach and just say we can get past it, we can work. We have to affirmatively have a strategy and understand what it is to deal with those problems. The very problem I mentioned at the very front end here, when I said that this woman got up and said, I will not work with her if she's in a leadership position because her daughter is selling heroin. I mean, think about it. If you already had a strategy and you understood that something like that could be said, and then you have a way to deal with it, that's a problem that's going to be mitigated quickly. And you tackle problems quickly. You don't let them fester. If you notice that one member of a team has adopted a behavior that's affecting a group in a bad way, you have to act quickly to challenge it. And I got to tell you, sometimes in Indian country, we are adverse to that kind of confrontation and challenging folks and stuff. And I've noticed in some of our group dynamics that we shy away from that, but we can't. We have to act quickly. We've got to challenge. We've got to provide feedback that shows the team members what the impact of their actions are. Encourage them to reflect on how they can change their behavior. I mean, this is about creating a group, but it's also about personal change, how we can affect personal change in leaders of our community. We have to define roles and responsibilities. Teams that lack focus or direction can quickly develop these poor dynamics that we talked about. And as people struggle to understand their role in a group, those dynamics, those poor dynamics can just compound on themselves. Create a team roadmap, all right? And this is the part I hate and hesitate to even talk about this, but what is a roadmap? Unfortunately, a roadmap is a written document. And it's something written that defines the group's mission, the objective, and everyone's responsibilities. I never like talking about this because it's always one more of those things where you go, oh, here we go. Now we've got to start writing a stack of documents. We got to do. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just creating a very simple roadmap and it keeps us on track. It gives us something to refer back to. And you got to do it kind of as soon as you form the team. That's going to be in the very early stages. And make sure that everybody has a copy of that document and remind people of it regularly. So there's a number of other things I wanted to talk about in these dynamics, but I will defer those things to a follow-on webinar since our time is absolutely getting away from us. So again, before I get away from this slide, trust is at the hub. Now, key as we've talked about these community partnerships. I mean, I am a huge proponent in assessment. If we're not assessing at every step that we take, and if we're not looking at what we're doing, constantly assessing what we're doing to ensure that we make adjustments, okay, as we're rolling out these initiatives, these things that we've recognized that we want to get done in our communities, as we're rolling these things out, we have to be looking and assessing the entire time so that we can make adjustments to improve when needed. And we also see what's working so that we can put emphasis on those things that are working. To know when we've accomplished is set out what we wanted to do. If we decide we want to eradicate graffiti in a housing addition, we can simply conduct a drive-through to see if we're having an impact, right? Just drive through. Is there less graffiti? Are we able to take care of graffiti as quickly as it's put up? A drive-through will tell us and can act as our assessment. If we decide to address alcohol-related car wrecks, like we've got listed here in this slide, then it's going to be important that we have front-end data so that we can monitor it. We have to have an idea how many alcohol-related car wrecks have we had on our reservation. Where are those wrecks? What are the severity of the wrecks? What kind of damage to the property? It's all data, and we gather that data on the front end so that we can benchmark what we are looking at and what we're doing. We'll then know when the numbers decrease or when positive changes occur. I got to tell you, oftentimes that on our reservations we have curves, hills, sometimes there are drop-offs. Where the most severe wrecks occur. I know on the Blackfeet Reservation, I know that there was a particular place where there were the accidents that occurred there were usually accidents that ended up in fatalities. So when we look at these things, as we're employing that SARA model again, back to the SARA model, when we employ that, then we may decide to place signs. We're going to place road signs that are going to tell people that this particular curve or this hill that is incredibly dangerous. Have sobriety checkpoints around that area. Put news articles in the newspaper. Host awareness sessions, etc. Those are all things that we can do, but we have to be able to go back and then make a determination against that benchmark. Did we have an effect? All right. We're coming to the end, and identifying neighborhood crime. So we're talking about what these collaborative partnerships, what we want to affect. We want to be able to identify neighborhood crime, disorder, and fear problems. We want to understand the conditions that give rise to these problems, developing and implementing solutions tailored to the problem. And I can't overstate that word tailor. These things have to be tailored to our communities. When there's these initiatives that come out of Washington or out of state capitals or out of places, they say, okay, this worked in this community, it's going to work in your community. That's not true. We've got to have solutions that are, well, I shouldn't say it's not true. We have to make sure that it's tailored to our community, most certainly, and make a determination then if we can take some of these template programs and employ them in our community. But everything has to be tailored to our needs and our issues. Determining the solution's impact on the problem. We got to know that did our solution have an impact, and that's back to that assessment part. always, I say over and over and over and over again, the key is to establish realistic goals. If we come up with all these ideas, these outlandish things that we're gonna do all these things, and as soon as we're not able to see progress, we're not able to drive a stake in the ground, then you know what? It's so easy then to just move on and say, well, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. In this particular session right here that we're looking at, one of the things we talked about, and it was creating a prescription drug take-back program. That was just like saying, let's drive a stake in the ground. We want to address prescription drugs in our community. Let's drive a stake in the ground, something that we can do, something that we can feel that is a success, and we can show the community that we have the ability to create these successes. So we're already at the, it's almost 1:20 already out here in DC, so we're 20 minutes over that first hour. But what I'd like to do is throw this out to questions or comments down in the chat bar there. And you see that Cindy's back, so thankfully she'll be able to close out the session. Teresa mentioned that she's from the Navajo reservation. Well, when we look at these situations, and I'm looking at the chat bar waiting for you guys to ask a question, offer a comment. Hello, are you there? As we talk about these things, and mentioned in the last webinar, when you look at the Navajo reservation, I mean, it's such a huge reservation, and chapter by chapter, or which would be area by area, these voting districts, the problems are different throughout even the Navajo reservation. So you can imagine that if that's the case, the Blackfeet reservation where I'm from and the Penobscot reservation in Maine, the issues that they deal with, they're similar, but they're different. And what we deal with across the board is similar but different. So I mentioned in the last webinar that I'm not a huge believer in these Indian country-wide statistics, because I think they can skew when we look at our community issues and we start looking at these national statistics, they kind of skew what that issue could be in our community. So Brett, do you have a question or a comment? Dorothy? So I'm going to take that I've done an incredible job talking about community collaborative partnerships, and I've answered every possible question there could ever be with regard to these partnerships. And I'll think about cutting you guys loose here in just a couple of seconds. And as I wrap it up, again, as I'll wrap up with this, there is no secret sauce. It's all about just thinking about these issues, and Dorothy, I see you saying you recommend Brookings as a potential retirement option. So I am I am in that phase of life where retirement is looming looming large. And Teresa commented, and I guess it's okay, Teresa. You only responded to me, so I hope it's okay if I use your name. But when she's talking about defining, as we talk about defining our roles in the community, so we talk about public safety, and she's talking about public safety. And when we talk about public safety, it has a very broad meaning. And public safety can be emergency management, security, law enforcement. But when you say, in a lot of our communities, when you say public safety, it only means law enforcement. So I think what we've got to, and what she's saying, and I agree with her, I think we've got to make sure that when we're in these groups and in our communities, we have to define what our roles are in communities and what that means. And police departments are police departments. Public safety can be broader, and if that is broader, then there has to truly be those other components that are working to ensure the emergency management part of what we do and the security part. And emergency management right now is exemplified by what's going on out in Oroville, California, with the potential, and hopefully it's a potential that is no longer, but when there was a potential of that dam overtopping on the emergency spillway overtopping, that could create devastating effects downstream, and that's where this emergency management is a very key thing in our communities, and we've got to ensure that when we're talking about collaborative community partnership, that too is part of that, how we're able to communicate with our constituents and how we're able to warn people of any number of issues that we could be facing. So collaborative community partnerships in our communities are essential. They're incredibly important. I can't overstate how much I believe in that once we break down silos and start talking to each other and we bring all those pieces of the puzzle together, we're going to truly make the kind of change that we have to have in Indian country, that we can change that. Whenever we get these statistics that come out, we're always at the top. And being at the top of a lot of these statistics is not the good place to be. And Indian country ends up at the top. We don't want our communities to end up at the top of those negative statistics. We want to be down at the bottom where we belong, and that comes from our culture, our traditions, our identity, and coming together and communicating. So I'm going to, and Michelle, thank you for your nice comment, and Dorothy for yours, and Brett. And I'm going to see you guys in our next webinar, and I'll look forward to that and be looking for the invitations. So Cindy, with that, I'll let you close it out.
Thank you, Walter. Wow, so I got to experience a full-on crash with my computer and trying to frantically get back on. I'm glad it didn't disrupt the webinar in general for the rest of you, so thank you for joining us. So to conclude, as a reminder, we will email you all today a link to view the video presentation of this webinar. It will come through our technical assistance site where you can access the previous webinars and information. So when I close the webinar today, please be sure to take just a couple of seconds and fill out the survey so that you can help us improve our presentations. We thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today, and appreciate your time. So with that, I'll end the meeting, and have a blessed day, everybody.